The Ted Lasso character was first introduced as an NBC sports bit to try to get more American fans interested in the EPL, just like how the NFL is having yearly games in England. It worked for me. And to make it even better, the series was made by Jason Sudeikis and Brendan Hunt, both of whom appeared in the skits almost a decade ago, and they play Ted Lasso and Coach Beard. The series starts with an introduction to AFC Richmond owner Rebecca Welton. She inherited the team in a recent divorce from her husband, Rupert. Former manager George is brought in and then immediately fired by Rebecca, to the surprise of Higgins. Higgins then asks if he should get together a list for potential candidates. Rebecca says there is no need. She already has it figured out. And then they transition to SVP, Scott Van Pelt. He is announcing that former Wichita State coach Ted Lasso has accepted the job and will become the first ever coach to switch from football, college football at that, and not even Division One, to soccer. And not just soccer, the Premier League. And for you non-Americans, sorry, I'm going to continue to refer to it as soccer because that's kind of the point of the show. Ted doesn't get it. Ted is then shown for the first time on screen on the plane to London. A fan asks him for an Ussie, and he says, "You mean a selfie?" And then the fan says, "Well, it's not really of myself, is it?" And he says, "Huh, good point." They joke, but ultimately this fan says Ted is going to get killed. Coach Beard is introduced for the first time as he is studying soccer for dummies and learning as much as possible in the plane ride over. And learns into touch means not out of bounds. He then wagers Beard $5 he can use it in a sentence later. They get off the plane and take a stop to visit the Tower Bridge. And Ted says it must not have been the London Bridge because it's still standing. Nathan is then introduced as he runs onto the pitch to get them off the grass. Ted and Coach Beard had wandered out there as they were looking around the stadium. He then finds out they are the new coaches and says they can take as much grass as they want. Right away, Ted Lasso takes a liking to Nathan and says he loves this kid to Coach Beard. Ted then sits down with Rebecca as they chat about the role, and he takes some tea that he instantly regrets and will never try again. Rebecca then gives him a tour around the stadium as she explains it was used during World War II as a hospital, and people think that there are ghosts running around the place. Rebecca then asks Ted if he believes in ghosts. He says he thinks it's more important for ghosts to believe in themselves. Ted is then forced into an instant press conference with the local media. He admits he's never coached soccer and says things like he's going to try for all four quarters. Then they say it's halves. And then he says, we're going to try win or lose. And then they say, or tie. And the media starts to get into a quiet frenzy at this point. Trent Krim from The Independent, as he will repeatedly say throughout this series, gets his first lines as he hammers Ted with questions that he just cannot answer. He is bombarded with yells from media and fans alike as they transition from shots from the press conference to shots at the local bar, as everyone is pretty pissed off. He then takes a sip of soda water and spits it out all over the front row because he thought it was regular water. He's not doing too well. Rebecca jumps in apologizing for her country's manners and says they have been nothing but profound mediocrity lately. They all pretty much come to an agreement and shut up. Rebecca then says, from now on, things are going to be this way, the Lasso way. One media member then says, I'll give it 3 weeks. Ted asks to see the team. Rebecca says, can't keep the gaffer from the pitch. Ted then says, tell you what, I went over 2 on that one. Rebecca then admits her plans to Higgins. She wants the team to fail to make Rupert suffer. She knows that AFC Richmond is his only true love, and she wants to run it into the ground. Higgins does not have an easy time doing this. He gets worse. Ted and Coach Beard then go on to watch practice as they try to evaluate their players' talent. They ultimately make their way back to the locker room. As the players get back to the locker room, all you see is an unrespectful team and a lot of angry looks, especially from Captain Roy Kent, who is a UCL champion and an EPL legend. Ted then falls asleep. Beard wakes him up, says you got to make it through so you can sleep at night, so you get over the jet lag. Then Ted invites Roy Kent into the locker room. They talk, and it's clear that Kent does not respect him, as he says he didn't think his career would end but being coached by Ronald fucking McDonald, as Ted was only trying to pay him a compliment about his career. Keely, who was introduced in the previous scene in the locker room as she was showing up to pick up her boyfriend Jamie to go get waxed. She then comes back and says she forgot his phone. As she was walking into the locker room, Ted was covering up an inappropriate picture of hers, let's just say, And Keely seems to like that. And Keely and Ted have an instant bond as she, quote unquote, helps him fix the sign that says believe, which is one of Ted's mottos. In the parking lot, we can see Higgins is not taking this news lightly. He's having a very hard time to go along with her plan. Rebecca then offers him a promotion, director of football operations. So Higgins accepts, and he's going to help her run the team into the ground, essentially. Rebecca then holds a guilt trip over his head by saying, "You never had a problem helping Rupert sneak women around all these years." Then Ted, in the passenger seat of Nathan's car, pretends like he's driving because it's on the left side in America. Gotta love Ted. The episode ends with Coach Beard and Ted Lasso walking back to their new homes for the foreseeable future that at least they hope. And Coach Beard pays off the $5 bet because Ted used into touch during the press conference in a completely wrong way, but he used the sentence, so he got paid the bet. Ted is shown in his new house, pretty lonely looking. It looks like the first time we've ever seen him not smile, and we're wondering what's going on. And all of a sudden, you can tell he starts counting, trying to find out if it's a decent hour to call his family. He calls his family. His son answers the phone, talks to him for a bit, then gets on the phone with his wife. And the show then tells us that they are on the outs. She wanted space. He said, "I'm giving you space." And she's like, "Yeah, but not like this. You can't be calling me all the time." And the episode ends on a sour note with Ted not being able to sleep, even after surviving the entire day, trying to beat off the jet lag. Two picks up right after episode one ended off, with Ted waking up, probably having a rough night of sleep. He goes downstairs, pours himself some cereal, and he finds out England has a different type of shredded wheats, I guess. He meets Coach Beard outside. Coach Beard asks if he's hungry, and he says, "Nah, I'm good. I had one piece of cereal." So then Ted and Coach Beard go to get some coffee. They get excited. They say it feels like it's the first day of school as they head to the stadium, and they're enjoying the local scenery, watching some kids play soccer in the park. Biscuits with the Boss is introduced for the first time as Ted tries to bond with Rebecca. He brings her a cookie and she immediately is obsessed with it. Then the coaches officially have their first practice. In practice, they are noticing that Jamie is he's very good, very talented, disrespectful to his teammates, and he's flashy. He makes Sam Adesanya look like a fool. He makes him fall. Ted pulls me over to the sideline. And this is one of the first bits of Ted's great coaching showing through. He tries to tell Sam to be like a goldfish, a 10-second memory. And he wants Sam to be like a goldfish. If anything like that happens again, just forget about it. And he doesn't really seem to understand the message. So Ted goes to Nate to find out more about Sam. He finds out that he's been homesick of Nigeria and he's been underperforming since he joined AFC Richmond. Back in the locker room, Ted introduces a suggestion box for any changes players would want, from serious issues to snacks, whatever they think needs an adjustment. This all backfires when Ted and Coach Beard are at a bar, and it's mostly just people saying yank, wanker, yank, fuck off, wanker, uh, except they had one suggestion that the shower pressure in the locker room is horrible. Back at the stadium, Keely is asking Ted, which is better, lion or a panda? Because it turns out she's a model and she has a shoot upcoming. So she's wondering what his opinion is. Ted goes panda. Rebecca overhears the conversation, takes it personally, and says, "Of course you go lion." And then Jamie walks out. Ted says, "Hey, Jamie, panda or lion?" And Jamie says, "I'm me. Why would I want to be anything different?" And then Ted says, "I don't think you quite understand how psychologically healthy that is." So the next day, Breakfast with the Boss Part 2 is kicked off as he brings the cookies yet again. Now, Rebecca is not really into this idea still, but she is definitely happy to get these cookies. Higgins is already growing a relationship with Ted, despite Rebecca's best efforts for that not to happen with anyone, let alone Higgins. He's the only one that knows of her plan. Back in the locker room, Ted tells Sam to leave, that the boss wants to speak to him. Now, all the team members start putting in money, but Jamie puts his gum in. This does not sit well with Ted, as he's really trying to do a team building experience here. And he could tell that Jamie just has no respect for the team or the coaches or anyone but himself, as he sees Jamie give the wanker sign to him on his way back to his office. Second press conference, it goes definitely a lot better than the first one. He actually remembers some people's names, but then Trent challenges him. He says, "Can you explain offsides?" Ted can't. He comes up with a quippy answer saying, "You can't really explain it, but you know it when you see it." But clearly, he's still way in over his head, but he just knows how to coach, and that's what he believes in. Rebecca then finds out Rupert has been having an affair for much longer than she knew of from a reporter from The Sun, of course. Ted talks to Rebecca about Jamie Tart. He wants to figure out, how to get to him. He wonders if Rebecca has any advice. Rebecca, of course, has the wrong advice in mind because she wants people not to like Ted. She suggests talking to Keeley, and a plan ignites in her brain. Ted goes over to Keely's shoot. He said, "I'm upset you went with the lion, but whatever. You look great." They have lunch. All that's happening here is Ted Lasso is trying to figure out what motivates Jamie. Keely says BJ's. He says, "All right, what else?" And ultimately, she says positive reinforcement. Then she's making a mess on her face because she's eating in all her makeup. So Ted's kind of feeding her and cleaning her off. But there's a photographer there and he takes a picture. And if you think back to Rebecca, that this is her plan. She's trying to get Jamie to clash with Ted, who's their best player. And she thinks he has the most say in the locker room, even though she doesn't know that Roy Kent really does. She doesn't know the team at this time or the players or what's best for anyone, but this is what's happening at this time. Then we're back ready for the first game that Ted is actually coaching against Crystal Palace, which is funny because a lot of the scenes in this show are shot at Crystal Palace, and it's why their jerseys look so similar. The birthday present and surprise to Sam went well, as he was truly surprised, and all the players and teammates brought in the cake and the presents for him, including items from Nigeria that he is very happy with that can remind him of home. Jamie doesn't like this bonding that's going on. Then the entire Nelson Road Stadium, who are the fans of AFC Richmond, are shouting wanker at Ted Lasso. Nobody respects him. No one's giving him a chance, including the fans that are watching at a bar. Then Ted says to Coach Beard, "Well, we got 90 minutes to win them back." And it turns out they lose 4-1, as we see Roy Kent pissed off with this performance, and he steams off into the shower. In this game, Arlo White, who's a famous commenter, he mentioned that Sam Adesanya played very well. So it turns out that he's starting to turn it around. But they also show the one goal scored was scored by Jamie Tart. It was a meaningless goal when they were already getting crushed, and he celebrated like he just won a World Cup. So Ted pulls Jamie into his office, compliments his skill, says, but he says he needs to work on being a teammate and he needs to turn the me into us, and then the sky will truly be the limit for Jamie Tart's potential. Roy notices the water pressure was fixed, and he seems to be a little bit happy with Ted for the first time here. And then the team continues to celebrate Sam's birthday with music and dancing, even though they just lost 4-1. Ted was really encouraging that the team celebrate for Sam because he knows he really needs this at the time. And in his mind, it's only one loss. The more important thing is bonding the team together. Trent Krim from The Independent was waiting outside. Jamie was the first to leave. That seems like that would happen every week. He asked Jamie how he's taking a loss. At first, he trying to remember what Ted just said to him. He's trying to say it's, I'm more than one guy. It's about a team. But then he gets pissed off and he tells him about the partying going on in the locker room. He doesn't mention that it's for a birthday. He just said they're singing and dancing. It's a complete joke. Then Ted and Beard head home, and Ted speaks to the young lady he noticed playing in the park earlier. She says, "You were rubbish today," but he accepts this criticism because he respects her, because he saw her absolutely crossing people up earlier in the day. She nutmegged someone. She has a lot of skill. So the two begin kicking the ball around. Rebecca then speaks to Higgins about the cameraman she hired, getting Keely and Ted to look like they were on a date. Higgins calls her to say, "Is this really what you want? Do you want us to post this story?" At the same exact moment, she sees a video of Rupert's new flame on TV. She remembers earlier that he'd been cheating on her for so much longer, so she wants to stick to her plan to ruin Rupert's love, which is AFC Richmond. So she decides to leak the pictures. Episode 3 starts with Rebecca waking up before her alarm, looking extremely excited for the day. She rushes into work, sits in her office, opens the paper, and nothing. She can't find anything on the story of Ted and Keeley, so her plan did not make the news yet. She immediately calls Higgins, who's having breakfast with his family. She says, "Get in here, shithead." Breakfast with the Boss Part 3 starts, and Rebecca ends it early to try to get Ted out the door ASAP as she is trying to make up a false news story about him, and she clearly doesn't want him around to find that out. Coach Beard and Ted are then looking over the last week's performance, and they both decide it's time to start fresh with the game plan that does not involve getting the ball to Jamie and hoping that they score. Nate walks in, and he actually has a suggestion. He never thought that they'd ask his opinion, but he's ready. He has many plays written down on pieces of paper in his pocket, and they go through one that they like, which involves Jamie being a decoy, and they agree to try it out on the pitch. Then Keely finds out about the photo, so she tells Ted. She says they're being framed to make it look like they are together. Her friend at the paper gave her 1 day to deal with it. So the two walk in and tell Rebecca, saying the Sun will run it tomorrow. Rebecca looks shocked, and she says, "Don't worry, I know the owner of the Sun, and I'll have it taken down." When they leave, Rebecca is now worried that they can trace the picture back to her. On the practice field, Nate's play is run, and it works beautifully. Jamie looks pissed because the ball does not go through him, and he's being used as a decoy, but the play works, so they're going to use it. Teammates in the locker room are picking on Nate, and Roy looks really pissed off. Ted gave everyone on the team a book to read, hand selected for each player. Every player seems to take their book home except Jamie when he throws his in the trash. Jamie then jumps in on teasing Nate, so Roy walks into the coach's room and lets Ted know about the situation. Ted says he's aware of this and he's not going to do anything about it because it's only going to make matters worse for Nate if the coach is the one that steps in. Roy walks out pissed, saying, "So you're not going to do anything about it?" He's like, "Nope." And then as he walks out, Ted turns to Coach Beard and says, "Roy's the one. We need to get his trust." Roy then goes to Jamie and demands he stops picking on Nate so the others will too, since they look up to him because he's so talented and he's widely known as their best player. Jamie says he'll take care of it, but instead walks up to Colin and Isaac and says, "Keep doing what you're doing." It makes me laugh. Rebecca then tells Ted she spoke to the owner of the Sun. Ted says, "God?" And she says, "No, the newspaper." And they're not going to run the story in exchange if the Independent, another newspaper they own, will do a one on one with Ted. Trent joins Ted on the sidelines to watch practice as Sam keeps improving. Jamie is complaining about this new play on the pitch, but Roy takes Ted's side and says it's going to work. And Ted tells Krim that the play was actually Nate's idea. In the locker room, Colin and Isaac start messing with Nate again, and Roy asks them if Jamie talked to them about leaving him alone. Roy storms out looking for Jamie, but he finds Keeley. The two seem to have a mutual liking right off the bat. Trent then asks Ted about the party for Sam after their losing performance to Crystal Palace, and he says he never cared about wins and losses. Trent doesn't seem to understand this at the time, but he will later, as Trent is then invited to an event where Ted is supposed to go speak to school children who have just won a championship. Keely goes to see Rebecca and they talk about the report. Also, Keely is noticing how upset Rebecca is about Rupert getting away with all his wrongdoings, and Rebecca is being killed in the media for the way she is running the team. You can tell that Rebecca and Keely are starting to form a friendship. Ted and Trent visit the local school children, and Ted is immediately called a wanker. He congrats the school children on their championship winning season, and then he surprises the class with Roy Kent, and the whole class kind of loses their mind. He says, "Let's not talk. Let's just go outside and kick the ball around." Roy then goes up to Ted and says, "The only reason I'm here is because my niece goes to school here." And his niece actually ends up kicking Ted in the face with the football, and everyone laughs about it. Roy goes up to Ted and says, "I'm done with your mind games," and he won't go along with them. And he's counting down the days till he's gone. Trent and Ted then go for Indian food from a previous Uber driver. He was actually the one who picked him up from the airport and showed him around London before getting to the stadium. He asked for the special. and it's really hot Indian food. Immediately, Trent Krim says, I can't eat this. And Ted is obviously struggling too, but he wants to eat all of Trent's food as well because he doesn't want them to feel bad. As Ted is stuffing his face with hot food, Trent asked him why he would leave Kansas to coach soccer, calling him irresponsible and how trying to let him know how much it means to the town. Ted then stops and he says, Trent, what do you love? Trent says, writing. Ted says, I love coaching. And what I said earlier about wins and losses, I really meant that. I don't only care about that, but I care about helping each player become the best version of themselves on and off the field. It's important to have someone believe in you. Trent is visibly impressed about how nice Ted is, and then Trent leaves, but Ted stays more to eat to eat more spicy food even though he can't fathom any more heat. Roy is then shown reading the book A Wrinkle in Time, which Ted Lasso gave to him, to his niece. He seems to understand why Ted gave him that specific book as he slams it. The Trent Krim article came out, and he did say that Ted is way over his head and he doesn't know soccer. But he says if the Lasso way is wrong, it's hard to imagine being right. In a business full of people that celebrate egos, Ted reins his in. Roy then confronts Jamie about his goons who mess with Nate, all driven by him reading A Wrinkle in Time, so Ted's plan is starting to work. The episode then ends with Trent Krim saying he can't help root for Ted Lasso, and Rebecca looks pissed off that her plan has backfired for now. Episode 4 opens up with the team being down 2-0 at halftime, as Roy is not taking this well, screaming to the team that we could play better, but Jamie is just in the corner insulting Sam, saying he didn't pass to him because the only reason he would pass to him is if his dad was Maradona. Then maybe he would think about passing to him. Roy overhears this and fights with Jamie in the locker room, and people split sides. Some people take Jamie's side, some people take Roy's side. They shift to practice, and Ted Lasso and Coach Beard can see with their own eyes that the team is still divided, as half are gathered around Jamie and the other half are gathered around Roy during practice. So Ted tries to find a way to fix this situation. Rebecca is planning the annual gala where they raise money for children, and it's spoken about how last year they rose $800,000 or quid, and they want to break that this year. So she's really nervous about it. Ted walks in wanting to talk, and it's just not the time because this is the first time she's actually doing it by herself without Rupert's help, even though she said she did most of the planning by herself anyway. Having Rupert around helped because everyone just seems to love him. Ted eventually brings up if he can sit at the same table with Roy and Jamie, and she just agrees quickly so she can get him out of the room because she's too flustered to talk about anything else. Then, as Ted walks down the street, Nate is there waiting as they're going together to this event. Nate says, how do I look? Ted says, if you want me to be honest, it doesn't look good. It doesn't fit you. And Nate says it's because it's his father's suit. He doesn't have anything else. So Ted goes on to buy Nate a suit. As everyone is showing up for the red carpet, most players just do their thing and walk on by. But Roy is relishing in this, and you can tell the plot and the story is just making it that he's just too selfish and too unaware of anybody else at this time. Roy shows up. He just goes right through all the photographers, tells them to all fuck off. And once he realizes which table he's at, he's like, no, we're switching tables. Ted steps up and says, no, 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 I parent trapped you too. I want you two to open up to each other and tell each other what you think is wrong with the other one. We need to fix this for the sake of the team. It doesn't go well at first. He says, all right, well, who needs a drink? And the entire table raised their hand. Rebecca is nervous about public speaking. Ted tries to give her advice by saying, make fun of yourself. People always like that, which she ended up doing. But right after that, Rupert shows up and he takes the entire spotlight off of her onto him. The next scene, Ted asks Roy what it was like for him when he was Jamie's age, because everything he doesn't like about Jamie is that he's self obsessed and cocky. Roy agrees that when he was Jamie's age, he was probably just as much of a prima donna. Nathan then walks up to thank Roy for talking to Colin and Isaac about not messing with him anymore, and you could see Roy's heart start to open up a little bit. Rebecca asks Rupert to do the auction. At first, he says no, but then gladly accepts because he loves the spotlight. And then he quote unquote compliments her dress by basically saying, I didn't know you could fit in that anymore. Good for you. It was a backhanded compliment. This guy's an asshole. The auction starts, and Keely wins the auction for Jamie over an older woman and another good looking woman. And she really gets into the auction when the young lady starts putting her bets to really high. And it then ends up Keely pays $25,000 for the date with her own boyfriend. Rebecca then opens up to Ted Lasso as she's outside crying, telling him how alone she feels, and she really doesn't want to feel that way. The two embrace. He offers for them to leave in the carousel. She says, no, I got to get through this. It's only going to make Rupert more happy if I fail to the entire night here. Roy then sees Jamie by himself at the bar, and he tells him a story about when he was coming up. There was a player that he didn't like because that player is pretty much Roy in this scenario. He's been around the block, he played in the league forever, and this player gave Roy a hard time. And he hated him. He hated him for it. But he says they eventually talked it over exactly the way that Ted Lasso is trying to force them to do, and they ended up winning a trophy together. So pretty much Roy wants Jamie and himself to get over everything they're fighting about. It's better for the team. The bonding seems to commence here. Then Ted asks Rupert about the musical guest Robbie Williams, who canceled, implying he is the reason that he didn't show up, since Rupert is saying one text and he'll be here. Rupert seems to feel like he's been caught here, so he makes a sly remark and leaves. Rebecca and Keely bond a little more as she tells Keely that Bex, the other good looking woman that was bidding on Jamie, was the second date Jamie brought to this event. Keely immediately goes to Jamie and asks about this, and Jamie admits, saying it was nice to see Kaylee look jealous. Then there's a bid going on for Roy, and Keely starts bidding for Roy, along with the older woman that we saw earlier bidding on Jamie. So she's bidding, 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 ends up putting the paddle down, flipping off Jamie, and storming off. The event ends with Rupert saying he is donating £1 million, saying that gets Rebecca over her goal of 800,000, which is basically mocking because obviously that gets it over because that gets it over just by itself. And he says it's for the children to Rebecca in a mockingly manner. This guy just wants to make her hurt. That's all he wants, which now we can start to see Rebecca's side on why she wants the team to tank because that's what he really loves. Ted Lasso and Higgins show up with the man on the street that Ted saw earlier, saying that he's a great undiscovered artist and he'll take care of everything since he doesn't want Rupert to call Robbie Williams because he knows he's the reason that Robbie Williams didn't show up in the first place. Whose name is Cam, ends up being a complete rock star. He rocks the place and everyone dances outside of Jamie. And then Ted comforts Rebecca about Rupert, telling Rebecca that maybe not everyone sees him for the way he is, but Ted does. Then Keely apologizes about bringing Roy into their fights. After this, she officially breaks up with Jamie, takes 2 bottles of alcohol, and leaves the party. As soon as she walks outside, she sees Rebecca standing there. She asks Rebecca if she wants to get shit faced drunk. She agrees. And then the two get on one of the carriages that Ted offered earlier. And they're just going around the city, bonding, getting completely drunk. And this is where a new friendship is formed. Episode 5 opens up with Higgins arriving to the field along with his entire family because one of their cars is not working. Ted walks by, he says hi to the family, but he slams his head on the door because he keeps checking on his family flight because his wife and son will be showing up today. Rebecca then talks to Ted about it, and Ted says his sharing of feelings and his constant optimism is too much for his wife, and she needed space, so that's how he ended up here. Then Keely shows up to Jamie's house, and he already has a new woman over, and she drops the keys and leaves. In training, once again, Jamie won't pass to Sam, and he shoots the ball, which would have went in, but Ted Lasso catches it, saying he has to learn how to pass, feeling like they've gone over this many times already. Ted tells the whole team that they need extra passes, but right as he's saying that, he says, practice is canceled. because his wife and kid show up and he runs the entire length of the pitch to them. Then Rebecca walks in on a branding deal. Keely is working for Jamie. She says, I thought you two broke up. She goes, doesn't mean I can't run a marketing campaign for him. So Rebecca offers Keely a job for brand marketing. She said she'll think it over and get back to her. Ted takes his family to the local bar that he often visits, even though most of the people in there just call him wankers. And his son goes to play darts and hits the one gentleman in the arm. So they leave. Roy and Keely then talk about Jamie as she tells Roy that they broke up. Then Ted is back at his house building a Lego double decker tour bus with his son. His wife joins in to help, and they all seem very happy at the moment. He then realizes his wife is crying, and she admits she doesn't feel the same way anymore, but says she'll keep trying. Then they asked Ted why he went 4,438 miles away if he wanted to truly work on his marriage. Ted said anything he would do would backfire, so he gave her that 4,438 miles of space. Higgins then joins in and tries to help, which will later form a group name for this team. The next game is starting, and keep in mind that Ted's family is here for this game. Richmond are down 2-0 just after 2 minutes. And prior to this, Jamie was in the locker room taking selfies. He has a fight with Ted, and his son walks in. He says the next score won't be just for himself, but also for his son. Richmond are down 2-0 after just 2 minutes, and then Jamie Tart scores an incredible solo goal, and Sally's like crazy, screaming, me, pointing to the back of his shirt. Sam Abasania is hurt, and Jamie steps over him. Roy freaks out, says, show respect to your teammate, and he turns Sam around, like literally pushes him over, and this sets Roy off. Roy and Jamie get into a scrap, and Jamie ends up getting a yellow card from fighting his own teammate. Just after this, Jamie scores a second goal to tie it and celebrates like crazy again without his teammates. Ted decides to run up to Rebecca, who's in the owner's box, to ask if he's allowed to take out Jamie. She says, you're the manager, do whatever you want. No one likes this move at all. Jamie won't shake Ted's hand, but then Roy demands everyone listen to Ted. He explains they are broken and need to change, and this is the first time all players take to his message, embracing change, so that everyone in their life can move on with theirs. He's starting to mix up his speech with his problems with his divorce, but then he switches Sam to midfield and tells everyone to listen to Coach Beard on the new changes for the rest of the game. Late in the game, Roy Kent is on a breakaway. He's clear off. He has an easy shot, but he decides to make the extra pass to Sam. So he listened to the coaching of Ted, and Sam scores an easy tap in goal as they win their first game with Ted as coach. Roy then compliments Ted on his coaching move as the home crowd chant wanker, but in a different way. Not in a way of disrespect, but in a way of approval. Ted lifts his son to wave to the crowd, and then Rebecca is worried that her plan will indeed backfire. Ted then says goodbye to his wife. He knows it's over. Ted tells his wife he wouldn't change a single thing. If there was something he could do to make her happy, he'd do it. But he can't. He tells her it's okay and that he's going to be okay. And he begins crying knowing that this is the end. He says goodbye to his son while holding back his tears. He then sits on a bench as Coach Beard brings him a beer, and they're both complimented by a local fan who was talking shit on them prior in the day. Before I get started with this week's recap, rewatching this series has made me realize how really thoughtful and heart provoking this show really could be. You know, if you listen to the podcast, I always used to call it, visual antidepressant, but they really do show multiple people going through things. So if you're going through something, make sure to reach out. Okay. Now, episode 6 begins when Ted wakes up sad and he realizes that his marriage is over and he finally takes off his wedding ring. He shows up to his office and he starts rambling, putting his shirt on backwards, just not making any sense. And then Beard tells Nate it's because of his now ex, Michelle. Ted asks Nate to play in practice, and Beard says to Nate he is not okay right now. Then we see Ted at his next press conference, and they're asking how he feels about the first win. He says it feels great, but then immediately the conversation shifts to Jamie because he was benched last game, and Jamie's actually in the back of the press room at the time. So one reporter says, "Are you really going to put your best player on the bench?" Ted answers by saying, "Well, that depends on Jamie because he wants him to be more of a team player and not a me player." Right after this, Rebecca tells Lasso that Man City are going to terminate the loan on they're going to terminate the loan on Jamie, and Ted mistakes this and he says they're going to take his house, and she goes, "No, no, 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 no. They want him back if he's not going to play." So the way it works in soccer, you can loan people out, but you still hold their rights. So they could play for a different team for one season and then come right back to you the next season. So now he understands this and tells Rebecca, "No, I have plans. I want to play him." He just says he has a plan and he needs to work it out, but he definitely intends to play Jamie. In the locker room, Jamie claims to be hurt and won't practice. This is actually a common theme when soccer players want to make a move. The most recent example I can think of is when Phil Coutinho faked a back injury to leave Liverpool for Barcelona. And I can say he faked it because he was playing for Brazil in the meantime, in between matches. So it's pretty common theme. So it's pretty cool that they put that in here. So it's shown that Jamie wants to go back to Man City. Then comes one of my favorite scenes of the entire series as Ted Lasso walks up to Jamie Tart and asks him, "So you can't practice, huh?" And he says, "Yeah, just I can't go today." And then as Ted is walking away, Jamie says, "Relax, Ted. It's just practice." And then Ted goes in to the infamous Allen Iverson, "It's just practice" speech. So here's a little bit of that here if you're not familiar with that. But being from Philadelphia, I found this scene particularly very funny.
If I can't practice, I can't practice, man. If I'm hurt, I'm hurt. I mean, simple as that. It ain't about that. I mean, it's not about that at all. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it's easy to talk about. It's easy to sum it up when you just talk about practice. We sitting here, I supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice. I mean, listen, we talking about practice, not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
After this rant, he tells Jamie to set up the cones with the reserves. Jamie then tells Colin and Isaac to do it, but then Colin and Isaac take Lasso's back, so he's lost his goons. Ted then asks Beard about Danny Rojas if he's any good, but no one has seen him play yet because he was injured when they signed him, so he hasn't been able to play on the field yet. But here comes Danny Rojas, everybody's new favorite character, running and screaming Danny Rojas, and football is life all around the field. He ends up being really good, and he had a great play with Sam to score a volley on a give and go. Keely then starts the job with Rebecca. She has to break the news that Rupert is now dating Bex from the benefit the previous episode, but her real name is Rebecca. So they're calling her Rebecca and they're calling our Rebecca old Rebecca. She does not like this at all. At the end of practice, Jamie's picking up the cones as Danny shows up and they have a crossbar challenge to see how many they can hit in a row. Danny wins, walking away screaming, "Football is life," and Danny Rojas once again. Coach Beard and Lasso are watching in the stands, and they now realize they have two aces. All they have to do is mold Jamie into the player that they want him to be, a team player. Next shot, Roy is on a treadmill, still reading A Wrinkle in Time. So you could tell that Roy is really starting to understand Ted's ethics, and he's starting to like him a lot. Keely walks in, and the two start bonding even more, and you can start to see a romantic flame start to blossom. Then Rojas gets injured in practice, where he literally tripped over nothing. He claims it was a ghost, which brings us back to episode 1, when Rebecca said the stadium was used to heal injured veterans, and the team believes that the treatment room is cursed, and that's why he got hurt, because he was in that treatment room before he went on the pitch that day. We're going to have a cursed reversed. And then they show up to the bar, the local bar that they're always at, and the bar owner shows the poster for young, fit men to go try out for AFC Richmond. But really, they were there to enlist soldiers. They enlisted 400 men that day to fight in the war, and they all took treatment in the Richmond treatment room, much of them dying. In order to defeat this curse, Ted asks everyone on the team to bring something personal to the club at midnight. They all murmur, no one's behind this idea, but then Roy stands up and says they are gonna do it and shut the fuck up and sit down. So Roy is definitely on Ted's side at this point. Sam then asks Rebecca if she's free tonight. He wants her to come to the ceremony. Ted thinks it'll only work if the whole team is there. She says, Sam, I will go for you. And it's very heartwarming. The ceremony begins, and the whole team starts putting in their personal items into the barrel, which they will eventually light on fire. They tell their stories. Some of them are sentimental, some of them are just funny and gags. But then Jamie shows up. He wasn't there the whole time. He tells this story of how his mom got him into football and she gave him these boots that he's going to put into the fire. But then he opens up about his father issues, and he said that's why he acts like he acts. He made a vow to be so tough that his dad could never hurt him again. So the team kind of understands where Jamie's coming from now. They all go outside and burn it all down. Then Danny Rojas runs onto the field and they celebrate drinking as a team united as Jamie starts singing the Richmond theme song as the night ends. The next day, the locker room is more united than ever. They're all cheering and happy, and everyone's in a good mood until you see Coach Beard and he tells him that Jamie went back to Man City. This does not sit well with Ted Lasso. He goes up to Rebecca, but she says there's nothing that she could have done. They wanted him back. They terminated the loan, which is a lie. She just didn't want the team to keep progressing and to not be relegated. Then in the office, all the coaches are sitting there sulking. Dana Rojas peeps his head in and says, Hey, coach, football is life. Then Ted takes down Jamie's jersey as he is no longer part of AFC Richmond. Episode 7 opens up with the team packing for a trip to Liverpool to play Everton. Rebecca and Keely are bonding more and more every day, and you can see that show in this episode because they're taking the flight together to Liverpool as she tells Higgins he needs to stay back this weekend. As you know, she was pretty pissed off about the team bonding, so that's why she got rid of Jamie. But then they go back to the locker room, and Ted notices the team is not in the highest of spirits. And he thought it might have been because of Jamie, but it turns out Roy just spits out, "We're in a shit mood because we haven't won in Everton for 60 years." So they're a little nervous about the match. Then on the way to the team bus, a reporter asked Ted how he feels about Jamie leaving. He's honest. He says, "To tell you the truth, it breaks my heart a little bit," and he wishes him all the best, and he's as respectful as he could be because he really was getting to him, and it really did hurt his feelings. As they arrive to Liverpool, Rebecca tells Keely it's the first anniversary while being divorced from Rupert. So she's pretty upset, and her friend Sassy's going to come over. So Sassy shows up, and the three bond right away. They're like the three amigos right off the bat, having fun. And Sassy's the type that really knows Rebecca deep down. And she says that you haven't even really met the real Rebecca yet because she still has her guard up from losing Rupert. Then they show Ted asking Nate his opinion for the game, but he's too nervous and he runs off. He doesn't tell Ted his plan. Then back with Sassy and the crew, she gets the ball rolling with the waiter, trying to set Rebecca up with the waiter as the two keep matching eyes. Sassy then meets Ted and is immediately attracted to him. Then upstairs in Ted's hotel suite, he is drinking away his sorrows while signing his divorce papers. Nate tried slipping notes under his door for his thoughts on the game, but Ted actually loses his mind and tells him to leave because he's in a really tough spot right now and he's very upset about signing these papers. Next morning, Ted immediately apologizes to Nate and he says his notes are great, but he wants Nate to give the pregame talk. He starts calling out each player individually about their mistakes to try to get them to play together, gaining confidence along the way. When he gets to Roy, Roy stands up. Roy gets right in his face. He says, "Go on, say it to my face." Well, he says it to his face. He says, "Anger is your superpower, Roy, and that's what made you one of the best midfielders in the history of the English Premier League. And the anger is gone." Right after this, Roy flips a bench that was bolted down to the ground and says, "Let's go get these fuckers." And Richmond win 1-0. And who scored the goal? Roy Kent. And the team erupts and they said they have to go out and celebrate. They all asked Keeley where they should go because her commercial has been running in their hotel since they got there of her some commercial spot she did for the city of Liverpool nightlife back in the day. So they ended up going to karaoke because that was part of her ad. Sassy then sets Rebecca up to do karaoke, and she truly opens up to the whole team, showing this different side of her. And the team has a lot of fun with her. As Rebecca is singing, though, Ted has a panic attack. The reason he has a panic attack probably is because the song she's singing is "Let It Go," and he just freaks out, walks out, sits down outside. Rebecca finds him, tells him it's okay and to breathe, and she is genuinely nice to him for the first time, showing that she does truly care for him as a person. He heads back to the hotel and he signs the divorce papers. The rest of the team leave, and Keely said she wants to walk as Roy is waiting by, and Rebecca looks very happy that she's waiting for him. Roy walks her to the hotel room and he gives her a kiss goodnight, and that's it. They both look very happy, but Keely looks a bit confused as to why Roy didn't go into her room. Rebecca then receives a thoughtful text from Ted as she eyes down the waiter from earlier, and then Sassy walks into Ted's room as the episode ends. So everyone ends up lucky in Liverpool, the best place on earth. Episode 8 opens up as Nate is sleeping in the back of the team bus on the way back from Liverpool so he wouldn't miss the bus. Apparently, he was way too drunk and didn't trust sleeping in the hotel, so he slept in the bus. And Rebecca wakes up in her hotel room with the waiter, forgets that he is in her hotel room. And then when she remembers this, she says, "Get out." And then Ted wakes up with Sassy and he did not know what to think. He actually felt pretty bad about sleeping with her, having just signed the divorce papers with his wife. They get back to the stadium. Coach Beard asks Ted what's going on. Ted says what's on his mind, and then he says, "Let's go into your office to talk." Keely then talks to Roy as he says he is busy. He can't hang out today. She still doesn't know what to think of it. She doesn't think that he is into her. Then Higgins, Nate, and Coach Beard are telling Ted to cut himself some slack and not be so upset about what happened last night. And Ted eventually feels a lot better, and they come up with the name the Diamond Dogs. So now, anytime they have a issue that they want to talk about, he's gonna call in the Diamond Dogs, and here they come. Ted thanks Rebecca for helping him out last night. She says, of course, he wants to thank her. She says, "I have a meeting with two minority owners and would love for you to come along." So Ted says, "Yes, I'll be there." Keely is talking to the players for potential brand meetings. Then Roy clears things up with her, saying he wants to go different this time, and that's why he's taking things slow. She admits that, okay, since we're going to be honest, I slept with Jamie last night, go separate ways for the time being. Roy goes into Ted's office and he calls them the Diamond Dogs. They help Roy too. They say, you have a past, she has a past. If you guys want to be together, just let it go and see what happens. So Roy seems to leave the room with this mindset. Next, we're in what was supposed to be the meeting with Milk Sisters, as Ted nicknamed them. But Rupert spoils it by saying that they sold their share to Bex and they are now engaged, and he'll soon have 2% back ownership in the team. And Rebecca is pissed. Roy and Keely talk, and Roy says she is over her thing with Jamie and asks her on a proper date. And Keely gets really, really excited about this. Back in the bar, Rupert is playing darts and he bets Ted on a game. Ted agrees and said if he wins, Rupert can pick the starting lineup for the last two games. And if not, he can't show up anywhere near the owner's box while Rebecca holds the key. As the game is drawing to an end, Rupert has the upper hand. He tells Ted he's about to send Sam back on defense where he belongs and that he never thought that Rebecca would fuck over an entire team. And Ted gets visually angry here. And he says, "Hey, better manners while I'm holding the dart. He tells him the story about how guys have underestimated him his entire life and how he saw this quote from Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental. And he says, if you would have asked me if I played darts, I would have told you the truth that I played every Sunday with my father till he passed away. He goes on to win the game. Rupert leaves, pissed off. Rebecca's really happy. Back at practice, Ted asks the team for a favor, and Sam says, "We will die for you, coach." He says, "Not necessary." As the team go on to lay down, spelling out "Hi, boss" to surprise Rebecca, and she seems like she's in a really good mood. Like she's starting to come around to Ted. Higgins is worried about capacity for the final game, saying that they need to sell more home tickets to have a better advantage against Manchester City. She says no, sell the team tickets to Man City fans, and she hopes that the away crowd will be bigger. And Higgins stands up to her and says no, and he won't do it, and he storms off. Same time, Keely walks in and says, Rebecca better tell Ted everything, or she will. Since she found proof that Rebecca hired the photographer to make it look like Ted and Keely were on a date. Episode 9 opens up with Roy being criticized for his poor play last match against Arsenal as Ted tries to cheer him up and he says, "Don't worry about it." And Rebecca is in the locker room having a photo shoot as she tells Ted she was really hurt by their last loss. Keely walks in and says, interesting. Rebecca, can we talk for a second? She pulls him into the room and says, "You need to tell Ted what is going on right now." Ted's final presser of the season is next, where reporters try and get something out of Ted on his game plan. He really won't say anything. Then the reporters start to speculate on the potential lineup. After this, Coach Beard and Nate say Roy needs to be benched, and Ted says no way. So now we know what the reporters were thinking. Rebecca then is surprised by Rupert once again, and he says he and Bex are having a kid, and he wanted her to find out from him so he could rub it in her face. Right after this, she finally gets the courage to tell Ted the truth as she walks into his office to let it all out. He forgives her. He says he understands. He says divorces can be tough. Rebecca starts crying in Ted's arms, saying how much she is thankful. And Ted says, "You gave me this opportunity and you changed my life for the better." On the pitch, Ted gets the team practicing hard for the final game against Manchester City, of course, where Jamie Tart is. Then Ted has a talk with Roy, letting him know that people are asking if he will be benched for the final game because of his poor play. Ted goes to see Coach Beard, who has been drinking, and says they need to sit Roy or everything they have done all season will be for nothing. Roy is then shown thinking what it would be like if he is truly benched, as his niece and Keely tell him that he is amazing whether or not he starts and he'll always be a great person in their mind. Higgins gets his job back, and Roy walks into the locker room and says second team is going to kick the first team's ass today, as he accepts that he's not going to start the final match. The season one finale of Ted Lasso arrives with Nate arriving at the clubhouse to find that his normal duties have been performed. He's pretty confused. He doesn't know what's going on. And at first, he thought he was getting fired and he started to yell at her, called her a shrew. But turns out he got promoted, as Ted says. And then the whole locker room shows themselves and they show that they knew what was going on the whole time as Coach Beard and Ted Lasso present Nate with his whistle and say, "You're officially Coach Nate." Roy then comes into Ted's office and tells him, due to league rules, he's going to have to pick a new captain. Ted disagrees and says, "No, you're my captain." And then Roy says, "Well, these are the rules. You got to pick a new captain." And then Ted says, "Well, new rule, you find the new captain." They go back and forth like this for a while, but finally Roy agrees and will pick a new captain. Then Ted and the entire Richmond squad are prepping for the match against Man City. Ted is trying to say, everybody relax, just a normal game. But then players start saying, oh, it's not a normal game. And Isaac brings up that they could be relegated. Then Sam goes, do you not get relegated in America? Ted says, no, everyone pretty much just plays out their schedule, good or bad. And everyone's pretty much fine with that. They have to play Manchester City for their last game. Who's on that team? Jamie Tart. So Coach Nate, I'm sorry, brings up a video of Jamie and he's trashing AFC Richmond, even though he's trying to act like he's not. But he ultimately says He's ready to put the final nail in the coffin. And then Isaac throws a chair into the TV, which made Roy pretty happy. At the bar, Ted and Coach Beard are talking about the relegation system, and the three fans that have been harassing Ted for the entire season pretty much come around and show him respect, even though they said he was shit. And Ted goes, "Come on, doesn't anybody have a little hope?" Everyone laughs at him and says, "It's the hope that kills you," which is the title of the finale episode. Ted has an emergency meeting at his house with the coaches, and Nate brings up the point that if Crystal Palace win their game by 6 goals or more, that Richmond could still advance. They could survive relegation with a draw if Crystal Palace wins their game by 6. Ted doesn't like this whole draw thing. He doesn't believe in ties. So he storms around his house looking for one of his miniature believe signs that he says he has all up over his house and calls the two coaches negative Nellies because he doesn't think anyone actually believes in their chances of winning the game. The next morning, Ted goes for breakfast with the boss, with Rebecca, and he goes into her office and he tells her that maybe she would have been better off with an actual soccer coach. And if it comes time for her to fire him, that he doesn't want her to feel bad. Rebecca, now fully on Team Lasso, says it's okay that he's not like every other coach. And she encourages him to cause confusion. And once he says that, he goes, yeah, or create chaos. And then the idea sparks, which draws right to the next scene where they are drawing up trick plays. He asks all the members of the team if they ever had a really good trick play, and they start writing them down and explaining them. And Ted has Coach Beard throw in the lasso special in there. Next up, Jamie is at the barbershop where we see the Ussie fan from episode 1. He goes to get an Ussie with Jamie while talking about Ted Lasso, saying that he likes Jamie now. Then the fan goes, yeah, he must be playing mind games. Jamie starts getting really confused, so he texts Keely to see if she can talk. He shows up at Keely's, but Roy answers the door. And the two have an awkward exchange and are sitting there. Roy made a coffee for Keely. Jamie bought a coffee for Keely. She mixes them together and says, all right, what's on your mind, Jamie? What's up? Jamie is saying how he believes Ted is playing mind games, and Roy and Keely both say no, he genuinely liked you, and he's not out to get you. Jamie leaves the house not believing in this still and says to Roy, enjoy the game on the bench tomorrow, old man. Right before the game, Roy goes up to Isaac and makes him captain, and he says, never stop throwing chairs. And then we're treated to another inspirational speech from Coach Lasso, where he's saying how he doesn't like the line, it's the hope that kills you. And now, being from America, I'm not familiar with this line, but all the players in the locker room seem to nod that they've heard this line before. He asks, do you believe in miracles to his team? And anyone that does, come on up in the circle. So the whole team gets riled up. They go next to him in the circle and they say, Captain, arm in. Everybody looks at Roy. Roy nods to Isaac. Isaac puts his hand in and he's like, all right, what's up, Skip? And Isaac says, Richmond on 12. Then we're in the game. It seems like it's pretty back and forth. Each side gets a good opportunity, including the Sandman trick play that Danny Rojas came up with. It was a nice chance, but ultimately, this half goes scoreless. In the locker room, Sam is asking to put up the Crystal Palace score, but Ted says no. We're going for the win, not to tie. And he also says, Roy, you're starting the second half. Let's get going. Then out of nowhere, Manchester City gets a penalty in the 61st minute and they take a 1-0 advantage. Right after that, Jamie Tart has a breakaway opportunity and Roy tracks him down and he gets him and he slide tackles and he breaks the play up, but hurts himself in the process, heads to the locker room. But before that, the entire Richmond fan base serenades Roy with his signature song. As Arlo White says, that's the same song we've been hearing in the Premier League for a decade. Roy then goes into the locker room and is comforted by Keely. Then, all of a sudden, the fans start to go a little crazy around the stadium, and you could feel the electricity buzzing. Nate says, hold on, hold on, hold on. Wow, Crystal Palace actually did it. They won 6-0. Now, as they say this, Ted relays the message onto the field so his players can know that all they need to do is tie. They don't need to win the game. As Richmond are given a free kick. Then this happens. Led by Isaac, the team decides to go with the Lasso special, really making Ted happy because he says, I didn't even say it. They're just going to run the play on their own. The Lasso special is a great play based on American football, which ends up with Danny Rojas scoring the tying goal on a great pass from Sam on a great play drew up by Ted Lasso and ran by his players. However, while everyone in the Richmond side is celebrating, Man City rushes down and they have an attack on goal. It's Jamie. He has a clear shot on net, but what does he do? He makes the extra pass. And unfortunately, Manchester City score to win the game and to send Richmond back down to the championship. On the way back to Richmond's locker room, Ted sees Jamie in a different treatment locker room, and he's being berated by his father for passing the ball. And we can kind of see why Jamie has this such a high guard up from having a father figure like this, always wanting him to be the one to score the goal and not be a team player. In the post-game speech, Ted tells the team to keep their heads up and to be grateful that they are going through this sad moment with all of these great folks together and that they will never be alone as a rendition of You'll Never Walk Alone is played in the background. Ted then says, Hey, Sam, what should we all act like right now? Sam says, a goldfish. As Jamie is heading towards his team bus to go back to Manchester, Coach Beard tracks him down and hands him a letter or a note from Ted Lasso that Jamie thinks is a love letter, but he opens it up and it says, Way to make that extra pass, Ted. Jamie seems pretty taken back by this and pretty happy to have received this note. And now he knows it wasn't mind games all along, that Ted does truly care for him. He also gave him one of his army figures to be his defense because he knows what he's going through with his father now. Then, as Higgins is exiting Rebecca's office so that Rebecca and Ted can speak, Ted figures he's getting fired. So he says, I'll save you the trouble and I'll just quit. But then Rebecca says, Ted, you're not going anywhere. Otherwise, how can we prepare for next season? Ted gets really excited and ends up spitting his bubble water all over Rebecca's face as the season ends. And I'll tell you what, this show is so good, so well done, and it's just a message of positivity that is sorely needed right now. So Ted Lasso, can't wait to have you back in my life for season 2, and I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much for watching this recap. That was actually my buddy Dan from Scene Invader, so do me a favor, head on over there and give them the subscription, not me, because they helped me out with this one. They also just have, good stuff on their channel that you should watch and check out. Make sure to like, subscribe, all that crap. Hey, go buy a mug, too, because, I got bills to pay.